Welcome to Moments with Marianne. This is your host, Marianne Pastana, and I am so excited to be celebrating 10 years of meaningful conversations with you. As we step into our new primetime hour, it's such an honor to share this exciting new chapter with you. So whether you're starting your day out, headed to work, or listening from wherever you are, this hour is designed to bring you thoughtful dialogue, fresh insight, and inspiring stories so you can make every moment count. So thank you for being here with me today, and let's dive in. We're here today with special guest, Macaulay Christian, who's here to share with us his two new books, Holindrian and the Human Revolution, and Children of Eternity. So what if the greatest revolution in science fiction isn't about overthrowing a ruler, but reclaiming what it truly means to be human? Well, today's guest is here to share with us just that. Macaulay Christian is a graduate of the University of Arizona, where he received his bachelor's degree in political science with an emphasis in American government and international relations, as well as a minor in classical history. He also received a Master's of Legal Studies from Arizona State University before beginning a career in the commercial construction industry, where he worked on a variety of projects from airports to data centers. He is currently pursuing a doctorate in public administration, where he is researching the impact of public education and policy shifts on the industry and investigating recommendations to rectify the ongoing skilled labor shortage across the country. So welcome to the show, Macaulay Christian.
Hi, Marianne. Thanks for having me.
Well, what an honor it is to have you here and to talk about your book. So why don't we start from the beginning? Like, what even inspired you to write this? I believe it's a trilogy, right?
Yeah, I think when it's all said and done, I'm looking at about 4 books. It's kind of what I've got charted out so far. But the journey kind of started young when I was in high school, starting creative writing classes, kind of as an elective, and just really enjoyed it. And then started kind of exploring with story ideas, things that I was just interested in, um, putting that down on paper, and it just kind of evolved from there.
So why don't you share your first book with us and what inspired you to write that one?
Yeah, so the first book, and it kind of functions as a prequel, is called Holindrian and the Human Revolution. The the nugget that kind of really started that story was the title character of Holindrian, and for me, it was kind of a way to start exploring a little bit of a spiritual and kind of more secular uh, aspects to a person or a character. So, um, you know, I'm a person who's really interested in history, and so kind of particularly American history. And so, like looking at folks like Abraham Lincoln or George Washington, who were folks who, especially in our American perspective, had really challenged the status quo and helped create a system that a lot of us really cherish, and feel a deep connection to beyond just, I think, just beyond just a civic duty. For some of us, I think it means more, almost like religion does to some people. And I kind of wanted to explore a little bit of what that looks like for a person. What does that mean to me, and how does that impact that individual who they're a man, or they're a person, just flesh and blood, but they're doing something that's very profound and that's going to have uh, generational impact on others. So it was kind of the starting piece for that first book.
Well, it's very interesting how this book dives into, you really kind of explore humanity under long-term control. So, what initially kind of inspired you to examine oppression, not just as a political force, but something that suppresses creativity and passion?
Yeah. Again, hi- I'm a student of history, so during uh, my undergraduate, I started, I was taking courses in Greek and Roman history, you know, in reading other fiction and other examples and just kind of marrying a bunch of different ideas kind of at the same time. I just thought it was kind of an interesting thing to explore, um, a system that establishes order and on the surface, it would be recognized as peaceful, no conflict, no crime, um, no civil unrest, but kind of at the expense of individuality, especially artistic expression. Um, I thought that again, something that'd be kind of interesting to me was maybe a little different of kind of what the price is for some of those security, um, way to have security imposed, and then just kind of the effect that'll have on people. And the story is really kind of about striking that balance, um, the balance between security and expression. And I think they're both equally important, and we shouldn't sacrifice one 100% for the other.
So, without giving any spoilers, can you share a little bit about this story with us?
Yeah. So that first book kind of opens up and it's broken into three parts predominantly. The first part for folks who are a fan of Tolkien, and if they're really hardcore fans, enjoy the Silmarillion. It kind of takes on kind of a mythos legendary kind of role. Wasn't necessarily the intent when I set out to write that portion of the book, but it was really a way for me to kind of compile, organize my thoughts and notes as I'm kind of building this world and these characters to kind of chart out a lot of the history. So for me, it just kind of made sense. And then the rest of the book follows the journey of Holindrian, who starts out as being part of the oppressive system and um, kind of gradually is having this realization that's been kind of gestating in his mind for a while of what he's been a part of and what the cost has been to the people, and he kind of starts igniting a revolution, working with allies of his, and it puts him into direct conflict with members of his own family. So the story on that side kind of picks up from there. And for him, there's a lot of personal anguish and toil as he's having to do both what he thinks is right, but contend with family members who are diametrically opposed to what he's trying to do.
Now, earlier you touched on just your education and some of your inspiration, and I found it so fascinating that ancient myths and this cosmic history play a major role in this world building. How did mythology influence the structure or meaning of this story?
It definitely plays a big role. You know, there was a lot of influences, some I've already alluded to, and part of it is sifting through those. And there's things that kind of just stick with you that are, for, at least for me, some aspects are more fascinating than others and have threads to kind of pull on. And when kind of working to come up with this mythology and history for uh, these characters in this world, um, it was just really important to me to kind of take it seriously as if this was another culture's history and legend, and just trying to make it feel robust and real, like and part of a world that's truly lived in. So that's kind of how I approach that.
I found it interesting the concept of human revolution. Kind of, I think when we think about that, it's like okay, that seems more of a physical kind of uprising. What does revolution mean to you on a spiritual and psychological level?
That's a really great question. I think for and I hope it kind of comes across over the course of the novel. Um, but there's obviously a very physical revolutionary act that's part of the story, but there is also definitely that spiritual and personal aspect to it um, where I think kind of in a sense it's seizing and recognizing your own identity, the things that make you a unique individual, your own passions, um, and feeling liberated and free enough to go pursue those. And I think for the characters in the book, it's them kind of rediscovering that level of autonomy to go do that.
So let's dive into Children of Eternity. Can you share a little bit about that book with us?
Absolutely. So, Children of Eternity is this my second book, and it is a continuation of the story that begins in Holindrian and the Human Revolution, um, but approaches it from a more traditional science fiction um, kind of framing. It's in more of it's an ensemble cast, multiple points of view, um, and it kind of kicks off my Apocalis series, where um, high level it's really kind of a journey of where do human beings want to go and progress. Where do we want our civilization to go and evolve into? And it's trying to have uh, take some initiative and have some agency over kind of our own future, both at more of an individual and collective level.
Well, I found it fascinating that you start this story off at the moment when humanity is like on the edge of annihilation. What prompted you to start there?
Yeah, so I mean, little spoiler. The prologue for Children of Eternity picks up right at the conclusion of Holindrian and the Human Revolution. Um, and it in part that's a little bit practical, just to you know show a little bit of what happens to Halendrian right away and a promise that he'll be back. um, but also I think it helps set up just kind of a relationship of where the story goes. It's starting with this kind of moment of fire, um, and chaos and change, and then when chapter one begins and you're kind of being reintroduced to the world after that's settled. um, I think it's in a sense a just an examination that change happens, and it can be chaotic and sometimes destructive, but people are resilient, systems and civilization are resilient. They usually come through it, and sometimes they come through it even better um, than when they started.
Was there any part of today's history that influenced either of your books?
Yeah, if I'm honest, there's a lot of I definitely don't try and actively make it an allegory, but it's hard for me, being someone who I went to school for political science, as I mentioned now a couple times, really interested in history. So it's hard for me not to incorporate some of the things that we see in our contemporary world and some of that influence. Um, One of the things I think Children of Eternity and several of my stories um, are trying to do is kind of look at civilization, where we want to go, but I think specifically American Western and democracy and how we want that to progress and evolve, and what we want that to look like and be, for ourselves, children, and future generations. So um, that's in that sense, there's a conscious choice to try and speak to that and incorporate that in the writing. And then for anyone who reads Children of Eternity, they're going to recognize things that we've had over the past 20 or so years, that especially in American life, there's things that'll come out. There's, I think, probably the most recognizable and is introduced very early is kind of an examination on the war on terror. That's not what the book is about, but it exists, and it was just kind of hard to escape for me.
Well, it's interesting what inspires a story or is reflected in the story. And so I appreciate you sharing that with us because I found your writing to be so profound. And I love how you have this promise of a blend of sacrifice, survival, and transcendence. So, how do you balance a high stakes plot with deeper psychological and emotional themes.
Well, hopefully readers will think I've done it well and stuck the landing. One of the things I've tried to do in this, both in Children of Eternity and then as I'm outlining other books in the series, I'm trying to just make it where it's hopefully it comes across as just an honest evolution for the character based on how they've been introduced and the dynamics and the role happening in the plot that they're encountering. For a couple of the characters, I try to set up some foreshadowing and elements and start to lay the groundwork so it can hopefully build. And then part of it is, um, trying to finish that evolution off with one of my preferred ways is conversation, not necessarily a big dramatic act all the time, but usually a conversation between two characters that kind of just hopefully is a teaching moment where they can demonstrate in that way their progression and their evolution.
So, I mean, my goodness, this series really has such vastness to it. How did you approach world building in a way that makes a setting kind of distinct from other really big sagas?
Again, I think part of it is I'm trying to I'm it's real to me. I mean, it's real in my head, where a lot of these ideas really started and they've been circling around for a while. Um, and so, when I sit down to sketch out a new kind of world building element, I do try and think about some of the history behind it and how it relates to other aspects in the world. And a lot of the time, those are elements that don't make it to the page that readers are ever going to see, or a very small fraction of them will. Um, but maybe it's just kind of the way my mind works. It's just important to kind of establish some of those details, and you know, in trying to keep it, fresh and a little different, and not too derivative of things that have come before. Um, one of the things I've tried to do is incorporate um, some vastness and diversity to things. So, like technology, it's science fiction, so there's faster than light travel. Not everyone is using the same engine or the same mechanism to go faster than light. Did some research on different hypothetical ways of doing it. Um, you know, so I try to make it seem like there were different evolutionary and technological paths these different species and civilizations developed. I've also tried to set some scale to when these species and entities come into being and when they explore the galaxy and encounter each other. Not everyone did it all at the same time, so um, some are much closer in their level of maturity, and others are much more advanced, and others still are very new. So um, part of it is also just kind of looking at how things are different across our world, um, when nations and people develop, and apply some of that to the world building.
I've heard that this book is dubbed as uh, is kind of called how do how do we explore this idea of what we inherit from the past and what we choose to create? Can you share on that for us?
Sure. And in a way that kind of tease up a little bit, even just the title, "Children of Eternity." The there is definitely a thread in this book about um, kind of legacy and inheritance, um, and just kind of how there, from whether it's our parents or um, forefathers in a country, there are things that happen in the past that have long-reaching consequences and impact that other generations are going to inherit, be responsible for. And so what we kind of see or start to explore in the book is a couple different ways that, in this case, humanity um, is going to have to contend with things that they weren't necessarily a part of um, creating, but they're going to have to be part of the solution.
It seems that the characters in Children of Eternity are really thrown into extreme circumstances. And without, I don't even know if you can do this without giving away any spoilers, but is there one that you can share with us?
Yeah, there's one, and because I think it's also going to be on the back cover blurb. So chapter one sets up and acknowledges that 30 years ago, for the characters in the story, a mysterious signal arrived from outside the galaxy, and after folks were able to decode the signal, they recognized that there was a message in it to construct a device, and um, humanity and some of their recent adversaries and folks they haven't gotten along with historically agree to, on this one issue, work together, um, contribute resources and expertise to uh, construct this device and hopefully communicate with the entity that sent it. Um, so, right at the beginning, there's something happening. Humanity and others were not involved um, in what prompted it, but as becomes clear in the story, humanity happens to be actually at the center of this, and they're going to be crucial in having to kind of weather the storm and help find a resolution to this for their sake and the galaxy's sake.
Oh my goodness. I know there are a lot of people that are going, okay, I need to get my hands on these books, you know? That's so intriguing. I mean, did you ever feel like you were going to write a series of books like this?
Probably not, but it's it's one of those things that's kind of fun to kind of daydream about, and then when you start working on it and developing and finding that you're really enjoying the characters, you're enjoying the story, you're interested and curious about what happens next. Um, and then when you get a little bit of positive feedback from folks who you trust will give you an honest answer that they're enjoying it and they're intrigued. It does inspire you and give you kind of some of that courage to uh, press on and um, in this case query and try and find an agent. And luckily I found a publisher, Free Minds Publications, who also enjoy the story and willing to work to make kind of this dream a reality.
So I know books are such a journey, and my goodness, you have been on one with the first two books that you have. What can we expect from book three?
So, book three, luckily it's written, and which I think the publisher enjoys hearing. I'm working my way through edits right now. That one uh, picks up shortly after Children of Eternity ends, and it, probably the thing I can say about it before folks have an opportunity to read Children of Eternity is it continues some of the quasi allegorical elements from Children of Eternity, but it is really kind of the pivot where the story, the characters kind of start to ramp up and leave that kind of allegorical framing where there's a lot more connective tissue to our real world um, and challenges that we've experienced and recognize, and starts to look forward into the future about um, where do we want to go and what kind of people do we want to be. So that's kind of what the third book really begins to push.
I think those are good questions for us at any time, and to have a book that kind of dives into that. Wow.
Yeah, no, it's it's been a little bit of a challenge, and but I'm excited. I want to get through these edits, and eventually be hopefully back talking to you about the next one.
Well, we can't wait. Macaulay, where can people go to learn more about your books, be part of your community, and of course, just follow what you're doing? Because this sounds so fascinating.
Well, they can go to MacaulayChristian.com. I routinely update the website, and right now it's in full Children of Eternity promo mode. So that's a great place for information on what's coming up. I'm also available and can be followed on Facebook, Macaulay Christian author, and then Instagram and Threads under ML Christ 1241. Um, you'll get to kind of see not just book conversations and content, but every now and then there'll be a dog photo or some cooking related Instagram food pictures. So there's a little bit of diversity there.
A little bit of everything. Well, Macaulay, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show with us here today.
Thank you so much, Marianne, for this opportunity.
Well, we're at the end of our time today. I'd like to thank everyone for tuning in. You're listening to Moments with Marianne, where we make every moment count.
In a single moment, your life can change. Moments with Marianne is a transformative hour that covers an endless array of topics with the best of the best. Her guests are leaders in their fields, ranging from inspirational authors, top industry leaders, and business and spiritual entrepreneurs. Each guest is gifted and a true visionary, a recognized leader in her own work, and while teaching others to develop, refocus, and grow, Marianne will bring the best guest and sometimes a special surprise. Don't miss this. You never know just which moment will change your life forever. Make sure to tune in and visit momentswithmarianne.com for more information.